I still remember the exact moment my family's laughter filled the dining room. I just announced my plan to start a frozen food business using Grandma Lou's recipes. Dad nearly choked on his wine. Mom's laugh was sharp, cutting. "Lottie, honey, that's not a real business," she said, wiping tears from her eyes. My siblings exchanged glances. Sarah, the dentist, shook her head. My brother Tom smirked from across the table. "Frozen food? Like TV dinners? Come on, Lottie." The room felt smaller with each laugh. I'd practiced this speech for weeks, believing they'd finally see my potential. "Grandma Lou's recipes are special," I insisted, my voice shaking. People loved her cooking. I could what? Dad interrupted. "Compete with billion-dollar companies? You don't have business experience, capital, or connections." His tone wasn't mean, just matter of fact. Somehow, that hurt worse. Mom's expression shifted to concern. "Sweetie, you're embarrassing yourself. And us." Her voice cracked. "This family has a reputation. I won't let you ruin it with some ridiculous food truck fantasy." The silence that followed was deafening. I stared at my untouched plate, feeling smaller than I had since childhood. Dad's next words hit like a physical blow. "Since you're clearly not thinking straight, we're cutting off your allowance. Maybe hunger will teach you responsibility." His credit card disappeared from my wallet that night. Mom handed me a job application for the local grocery store. I packed my few belongings into garbage bags, my hands trembling with rage and humiliation. 26 years old, and I was being kicked out for having a dream. As I loaded my beat-up Honda, Mom stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Don't come crawling back when this fails," she called out. "We won't bail you out again." I drove aimlessly for hours before parking outside St. Mary's Church, where we'd held Grandma Lou's funeral 3 months earlier. The parking lot was empty, except for a few scattered leaves dancing in the wind. I reclined my seat and pulled a thin blanket over myself. Through my car window, I stared at the church's stained glass windows, remembering how packed it was during Grandma's service. Everyone talked about her famous funeral potatoes, her legendary casseroles. She had magic in her hands, people whispered. Maybe that magic lived in her recipes. Maybe it could live in me too. I woke to frost covering my windshield and my breath visible in small puffs. My back ached from sleeping in the driver's seat. The church bells chimed 7 times, reminding me it was Sunday. I watched families stream into the building, all dressed up, carrying covered dishes for the potluck. My stomach growled loudly. I hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Digging through my purse, I found 3 crumpled dollar bills and some loose change. Enough for coffee and a donut at the gas station across the street. That's when I remembered. Grandma Lou's recipe book was still in my trunk. She'd slipped it to me during her final hospital visit, her frail hands pressing the worn leather journal into mine. "Make something of this, honey," she'd whispered. These recipes fed families for 50 years. I'd tucked it away, too overwhelmed by grief to look inside. Now, sitting in my car with nowhere to go, I pulled it out. The pages were yellowed and stained, filled with her careful handwriting. Funeral potatoes, casserole supreme, meatloaf muffins. Simple comfort food that made people feel loved. A crazy idea began forming in my mind. The church kitchen sat empty after the Sunday service. I'd helped clean it many times during high school, so I knew where they kept the spare key. The industrial stove gleamed under, fluorescent lights, surrounded by huge pots and prep tables. I opened Grandma's book to the first recipe, funeral potatoes. Hash browns, cheese, cream of mushroom soup, topped with cornflakes. Nothing fancy, but it had made grown men cry at her funeral. People lined up for seconds and thirds. Using my last $20, I bought ingredients at the discount grocery store. My hands shook as I mixed everything together, following Grandma's careful instructions. The handwriting was so familiar, like she was guiding me from beyond. The casserole went into the oven, and the kitchen filled with that unmistakable aroma, creamy, cheesy, comforting. It smelled like childhood, like safety, like home. For the first time in days, I felt something other than despair. When the timer rang, I pulled out a perfect golden brown dish. I took a small bite and nearly cried. It tasted exactly like Grandma's. The magic was real, and somehow I'd captured it. But then the lights flickered and died. Power outage. I watched helplessly as my perfect batch of funeral potatoes slowly cooled in the dark oven. The church's old electrical system had given out, leaving me with 15 pounds of barely cooked casserole. I sat in the dark kitchen, head in my hands, wondering if this was some kind of sign. That's when I heard whistling outside. Frank, the church janitor, appeared in the doorway with a flashlight. "Lottie, what are you doing here in the dark?" I explained my situation. Embarrassed but desperate. Frank listened without judgment, his weathered face kind in the flashlight's glow. He'd known my family for years, remembered Grandma Lou's cooking from countless church events. "Tell you what," he said, disappearing into the utility closet. He emerged with a small generator, its cord snaking behind him. "This old thing might help. Can't promise it'll last long, but it might finish your cooking." The generator coughed to life, and the kitchen lights flickered on. Frank helped me transfer the casserole to smaller dishes and finish baking them. As we worked, he shared stories about Grandma Lou, how her food brought the community together. "She had something special," he said. "Looks like it runs in the family." His words gave me hope when I had none left. The next morning I woke up determined. I had 12 perfect trays of funeral potatoes and a wild idea. If people loved Grandma's cooking so much, maybe they'd pay for the convenience of having it frozen and ready to heat. I drove to Deshawn's Kitchen Supply, a rundown restaurant equipment store I'd noticed near downtown. The owner, Deshawn Williams, was about my age with tired eyes and calloused hands. His toddler son played with toy trucks in the corner, while Deshawn sorted through inventory. "I'm looking for a place to rent kitchen space," I said nervously. "Something affordable." Deshawn laughed, but not meanly. "Lady, this ain't exactly a fancy culinary incubator. I got a half-broken kitchen in the back. Health department cleared it last year, but barely." He gestured toward a doorway covered by a hanging plastic sheet. The kitchen was rough, dented prep tables, a temperamental oven, and a freezer that hummed ominously. But it was clean, functional, and desperate like me. "How much?" I asked. $200 a month, plus you help watch my son sometimes," Deshawn said. "Deal?" We shook hands, two underdogs betting on each other. It felt like the beginning of something real. My first real customer was Mr. Peterson, who ran Pete's Corner store 6 blocks away. I walked in carrying an insulated bag with 5 frozen trays, my heart pounding like I was about to rob the place. "Funeral potatoes?" Pete squinted at my handwritten labels. "What kind of name is that for food?" I explained the recipe's history, how it got its name from being served at every church funeral in our town. Pete's expression softened. He'd grown up here too, remembered those gatherings. "Tell you what," he said. "I'll take them on consignment. If they sell, you get paid. If not, you take them back." Within 3 days, all 5 trays were gone. An elderly customer named Mrs. Rodriguez bought the last one and returned the next day. "Mia, this tastes like my childhood," she said, tears in her eyes. "Do you have more?" That's when I knew I had something special. But my celebration was short-lived. A health inspector showed up at Pete's store the following week, asking specifically about my products. Someone had called in an anonymous complaint. The inspector examined my labels, checked my kitchen certification, and asked detailed questions about my process. Everything was legal, but barely. I passed inspection by the slimmest margin. Walking to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling someone wanted me to fail. The anonymous complaint bothered me, but I pushed forward. I renamed some dishes to sound more appealing. Comfort casserole, instead of tuna noodle surprise, but kept the funeral potatoes. The name had character, told a story. That's when inspiration struck. What if each dish came with its actual story? I started adding small labels to each tray, sharing the recipe's history. Grandma Lou served this at every church potluck for 30 years. This recipe once fed 50 people during the 1978 blizzard. People loved the stories. Orders increased from Pete's store, and he recommended me to his supplier friend who serviced other small grocers. Soon I was making 50 trays a week, working 18-hour days in Deshawn's kitchen. The breakthrough came when Taurus Family Market placed an order for 100 trays. Their biggest freezer had broken, and they needed something ready for their weekend rush. The delivery was due Thursday morning, no exceptions. Wednesday night, I was frantically assembling the last trays when Deshawn's son spiked a fever. Deshawn had to leave, and I was alone with a mountain of work. My hands were cramping, my back ached, but I kept going. At 3 a.m., I finished the last tray, collapsed on a flour sack, and set my alarm for 6 a.m. Thursday morning brought the worst snowstorm in 15 years. My delivery van, really just my Honda with a cooler bungee corded to the roof, was buried under 8 inches of snow. The roads were impassable, and Taurus Market was 12 miles away. I called Mrs. Taurus, panicking. "The storm, I can't get the delivery truck out." "No excuses," she said firmly. "My customers are expecting those trays. If you can't deliver, we'll find someone who can." Deshaun appeared at the kitchen door, his son bundled in blankets. "What's wrong?" When I explained, he grabbed his keys. "My SUV's got 4-wheel drive. Let's go." We loaded the frozen trays into coolers and blankets, praying they'd stay frozen during the drive. Deshaun's SUV coughed and wheezed through the snow-covered streets, heater barely working. His son slept in the back while we inched toward the market. 2 hours later, we arrived with 98 intact trays. Mrs. Torres met us at the loading dock, helped us unload despite the cold. "You could have canceled," she said. "Most suppliers would have." "I gave my word," I replied. She smiled and handed me a check. "Next week, I want 200 trays. That night, sorting through Grandma Lou's things in my storage unit, I found a shoebox full of old Polaroids. Pictures of church dinners, community potlucks, neighbors gathered around tables laden with her food. Everyone looked genuinely happy, connected. One photo made me stop. Grandma Lou serving her famous meatloaf to a young couple with a baby. On the back, she'd written, "The Hendersons, first meal after losing their home. Food is love made visible." I stared at that photo for an hour. This wasn't just about business or proving my family wrong. This was about continuing something beautiful, something that mattered. Grandma Lou hadn't just fed people. She'd brought them together, made them feel valued. I redesigned my packaging that night, adding warm colors and vintage fonts. Each label would tell a story, connect customers to the food's history. The frozen meal aisle was sterile, corporate. My products would feel handmade, personal. I found an old church photo of Grandma Lou laughing while serving at a potluck. That became my logo, a reminder that food should bring joy, not just convenience. The next morning, I cried happy tears while applying the new labels to fresh trays. 3 weeks later, my mother appeared at Deshaun's kitchen unannounced. She walked through the door in her designer coat and heels, looking completely out of place among the industrial equipment and flour-dusted surfaces. "Charlotte," she said, using my full name like a weapon. "We need to talk." Behind her stood a man in an expensive suit, Richard Pemberton, a local investor my parents knew from their country club. He surveyed the kitchen with barely concealed disgust. "Your little hobby has caused quite a stir," Mom continued. "Richard here thinks there might be some potential. He's willing to invest." Richard stepped forward, offering his card. "I've heard interesting things about your product. With proper funding and professional management, we could scale this into something significant." The offer was tempting. $100,000 in exchange for 60% equity and creative consultation. They'd handle marketing, distribution, everything. I'd just cook. "We'd need to rebrand, of course," Richard added. "Something more marketable than funeral potatoes. And these story labels are too sentimental. Customers want clean, modern packaging." My stomach dropped. They wanted to strip away everything that made my products special. "No," I said quietly. Mom's face hardened. "Don't be stubborn, Charlotte. This is your chance to be legitimate." I said no. After they left, I sat in the empty kitchen, questioning everything. Mom's parting words echoed, "Don't come crawling back when you realize you're in over your head." But I wasn't in over my head. I was building something meaningful. The next week proved it. Orders doubled, then tripled. Small grocers across the county wanted my products. The stories resonated with customers who were tired of faceless corporate brands. I hired my first employee, Maria Santos, a single mom who'd been laid off from the restaurant supply company. She was overqualified for food prep work but needed flexible hours. Within days, she was suggesting improvements to our process, ways to scale without losing quality. Then came Tommy Chen, fresh out of culinary school with nowhere to go because he couldn't afford to work unpaid internships at fancy restaurants. He brought technique and innovation while respecting Grandma Lou's original recipes. Deshaun's kitchen buzzed with activity. We were becoming a real team, people who believed in what we were building. Late nights didn't feel like work when you were surrounded by people who cared. That's when disaster struck. I arrived Monday morning to find smoke damage throughout the kitchen. The fire department said it started near the electrical panel, possibly arson, but they couldn't prove it. Standing in the smoke-damaged kitchen, I felt like giving up. Insurance would cover some costs, but we'd be shut down for weeks. Orders would disappear. Customers would move on. Deshawn kicked at a charred prep table. Who would do this? That's when I started connecting dots. The anonymous health department complaint. The convenient timing of Mom's investment offer. The fact that someone had called in the fire as an electrical hazard before any flames were visible. I drove to Pete's corner store, needing answers. Pete looked uncomfortable when I asked about recent visits from strangers asking about my products. Well, he said slowly, there was this guy last week. Nice suit, said he was doing market research. Asked a lot of questions about your business, how much you sell, where you make the food, stuff like that. My heart sank. The investigation was already underway. That evening, I sat in my car outside my parents' house, watching them through the living room window. They looked so normal, so respectable. It was hard to believe they'd stooped to sabotage. But then I remembered Mom's words, "We won't let you ruin this family's reputation." Apparently, they meant it. I rang the doorbell at 8 p.m., knowing they'd be home watching their evening news. Dad answered, surprise flickering across his face before settling into his usual stern expression. "Charlotte, what do you want?" "To talk," I said, "about the fire." Mom appeared behind him, hand fluttering to her throat. "Fire? What fire?" Her acting was terrible. She'd always been a bad liar, getting flustered when caught. "Don't play dumb, Mom. Someone's been calling health inspectors asking questions about my business. Now there's a convenient fire right when things were going well." "You're paranoid," Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe you should take this as a sign to pursue something more traditional." "Like what?" "Working at the grocery store you wanted me to apply to?" Mom stepped forward, her mask slipping. "We're trying to protect you from yourself, Charlotte. This little food business is embarrassing. People talk. They ask us about our daughter who's making TV dinners in some warehouse. So you decided to destroy it?" "We didn't destroy anything," Dad said sharply. "But maybe this setback will help you see reason. You're not cut out for business, honey. You never were." I stared at them, seeing clearly for the first time. They weren't protecting me. They were protecting themselves from the embarrassment of having a daughter who didn't fit their image. I left my parents' house more determined than ever. That night, I called everyone on my team. "We're rebuilding," I told them. "Bigger and better." Maria found us a temporary space, a commercial kitchen in the next town that rented by the hour. Tommy arranged for equipment loans from his culinary school connections. Deshawn worked with his insurance company to expedite repairs. Within a week, we were back in production. The temporary setup was cramped and inefficient, but we made it work. Orders that I thought we'd lost stayed loyal. Customers understood delays and waited patiently. Then came the call that changed everything. "Is this Charlotte Quinn from Lou's Kitchen?" The voice was professional, excited. "Yes, but we go by Lottie's Kitchen now." "I'm Jennifer Walsh from Midwest Market Solutions. I found your funeral potatoes in my office break room freezer last week. Where did you get them?" I explained our distribution, expecting another small order. Instead, Jennifer dropped a bombshell. "I'm a regional buyer for grocery chains across Illinois and Wisconsin. Would you be interested in a trial placement? 3 stores to start, but if sales are good, we're talking 50 locations." My hands shook as I wrote down the details. This was it. The break I'd dreamed of. Deshawn hugged me so hard he lifted me off the ground. "You're really doing it, Lottie. You're making it happen." The trial placement was overwhelming. 50 stores meant producing 2,000 trays per week, 10 times our current capacity. I hired 4 more people, mostly folks who needed second chances, ex-cons, refugees, people others wouldn't hire. But success came with a price. Deshawn's son got sick again, and this time it was serious. Pneumonia that required hospitalization. Deshawn was torn between work and family, exhausted from splitting time between the kitchen and the hospital. "Take time off," I told him. "Family comes first. But the orders? We'll manage. Take care of your boy." That week tested everything we'd built. Working 18-hour days, I coordinated production, managed deliveries, and kept quality consistent. My new employees stepped up beyond anything I'd expected. Maria took on supervisory duties. Tommy redesigned our workflow to be more efficient. Most surprising was Jerome, an ex-con who'd been with us only 2 weeks. He arrived early each day, stayed late, and quietly fixed problems before they became crises. "This place gave me a chance," he said when I thanked him. "I want it to succeed." By Friday, we'd met every deadline. When Deshaun returned the following Monday, his son healthy and smiling, the kitchen was running smoother than ever. "How did you?" he started. "We're a team," I said simply. "That's how." Success brought unexpected challenges. A new frozen food company called Heritage Comfort Foods appeared in stores with packaging suspiciously similar to mine. Their labels told family stories, used vintage fonts, even had a similar logo. But what really stunned was discovering who funded them. My cousin Bradley, using money from his tech startup sale. He'd taken my concept and tried to mass produce it with professional marketing and deep pockets. The worst part, their funeral potatoes were terrible, flavorless, artificial, nothing like the original. But they had distribution deals I could only dream of. Placement in major chain stores where I couldn't compete. I spent a week feeling defeated, watching my unique concept get copied and commercialized. Then Tommy made a suggestion that changed my perspective. "What if we leaned into being the original?" he said. "Tell that story too." My next batch of labels included a new message. "The recipe thieves tried to copy this one, but they can't steal Grandma Lou's love." Customers responded immediately, sharing photos on social media with hashtags like original recipe and real comfort food. Sales actually increased. People wanted authenticity, not cheap imitations. The turning point came when food critic Margaret Chen, no relation to Tommy, bought a tray of funeral potatoes at a random grocery store. She was visiting her elderly mother and needed something quick to heat for dinner. 3 days later, her review appeared in the Chicago Food Weekly. "Shame has never tasted so good." Lottie's kitchen proves that the best comfort food comes from real comfort. The kind you can't manufacture or fake. These aren't just frozen meals, they're edible memories. The review went viral. Orders exploded overnight. My phone rang constantly with interview requests, distribution opportunities, and investment offers. Suddenly, everyone wanted to be part of what we were building. But the attention felt strange. For months, I'd worked in obscurity, focusing on the food and the customers. Now strangers were calling me a food entrepreneur and a heartland success story. The weirdest part? I barely reacted to the fame. Success felt good, but it wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. It was about continuing Grandma Lou's legacy and providing good jobs for people who needed them. That perspective helped when the next wave of challenges hit. The Women in Business Conference invitation arrived on a Tuesday. "We'd love to have you speak about overcoming family opposition to pursue your dreams," the organizer wrote. Standing on that stage, looking out at 300 successful women, I spotted a familiar face in the third row. My mother. She sat rigid, hands folded, expression unreadable. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away. My speech was simple and honest. I talked about Grandma Lou, about sleeping in my car, about the fire and the sabotage. I talked about building something meaningful with people others had given up on. "They only love your success when it's profitable," I concluded. But real success is about staying true to your values even when it's hard. The standing ovation felt surreal. Afterward, dozens of women approached with their own stories of family opposition and eventual triumph. The connection was powerful, validating. Mom approached as I was packing up. "That was interesting," she said carefully. "Thanks for coming." "I didn't know about the fire," she said quietly. "Your father, he can be protective in the wrong ways." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was acknowledgement, a start. The conference speech opened new doors. Within a month, I was featured in 3 national magazines and invited to appear on a morning talk show. The business was growing so fast I could barely keep up. That's when my family made their move. Dad called on a Thursday, his voice unusually warm. "Charlotte, we've been thinking. This business of yours, it's really taken off." "Thanks, Dad. We'd like to help. Officially. We could license the family name, maybe expand into franchising." Quinn Family Kitchen has a nice ring to it. The offer was generous. They'd invest $500,000 for a partnership deal. Mom had even designed a logo featuring our family crest. They wanted in on the success they'd tried to destroy. I listened to their pitch with growing amusement. After months of calling my business an embarrassment, they now wanted to attach their name to it. I appreciate the offer, I said finally. But I have some conditions. Of course. What did you have in mind? No family name on the brand. Anyone who wants to join starts at the bottom. Food prep, delivery, whatever needs doing. You train under Deshawn and earn your place like everyone else. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if they'd hung up. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. That's not exactly what we had in mind. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. I didn't expect anyone to accept my conditions. They were deliberately harsh, designed to weed out anyone who wasn't serious about the work itself, rather than the glory. But the following Monday, my sister Sarah showed up at the kitchen. She stood in the doorway wearing jeans and sneakers instead of her usual business attire, looking nervous but determined. "I'm here for training," she said simply. I stared at her, remembering the sister who used to sneak me candy during her dental school study sessions, who defended me when kids made fun of my secondhand clothes. That Sarah had been buried under years of family expectations and professional success. "You sure about this?" "It's real work, 10-hour days, minimum wage to start." "I'm sure." She tied her hair back and looked around the kitchen. "Where do I start?" Deshawn stepped forward, assessing her like he did all new hires. "Ever worked in food service?" "Only as a teenager. I'm ready to learn." For the first time in years, my sister and I were on the same team. It felt like coming home. Tommy showed her the basics: food safety, prep techniques, packaging standards. She absorbed everything quickly, asking thoughtful questions and taking detailed notes. By the end of the week, she was contributing meaningfully to production. The rest of the family stayed away, apparently unwilling to start at the bottom. Cleaning out more of Grandma Lou's belongings, I found a sealed envelope tucked in the back of her recipe journal. My name was written on it in her careful script. Inside was a recipe I'd never seen: poor man's lasagna. Below it, a note: for my Lottie, who understands that the best dishes come from making something beautiful out of what you have. The recipe was brilliant: layers of pasta, meat sauce and cheese, but using simple ingredients in creative ways. It was comfort food at its finest, the kind of dish that could feed a family for days on a tight budget. I cried reading her words, feeling her presence in the kitchen as I tested the recipe. It was perfect, hearty, flavorful, exactly the kind of dish that told a story. Sarah helped me scale the recipe for production. Working beside her felt natural, like we'd always been a team. She'd found her rhythm in the kitchen, contributing ideas and improvements while respecting the traditions we were preserving. "This one's special," she said, tasting the finished product. "Launch it at the conference next month?" The National Comfort Food Convention was our biggest opportunity yet. A chance to introduce new products to buyers from across the country. Perfect timing, I agreed. The convention launch was everything I dreamed of. Our booth featured the complete shame line. Every recipe with its honest backstory, every dish connected to real memories and authentic experiences. The poor man's lasagna was the star. Buyers lined up to taste it, drawn by the story of Grandma Lou's final recipe and the journey to bring it to market. Orders poured in faster than I could write them down, but the moment I'll never forget was seeing my parents in the crowd. They stood at the back of our demonstration area, watching as customers laughed, cried, and connected with our products. Mom's expression was unreadable, but she stayed for the entire presentation. Afterward, a food blogger asked about my inspiration. "My grandmother taught me that food is love made visible," I said, repeating words from that old Polaroid. "Every dish tells a story. We just make sure those stories get heard." The crowd applauded, but I was watching my parents. Dad nodded slightly. The first sign of approval I'd seen from him in years. Mom's eyes were bright with unshed tears. They left without speaking to me, but their presence felt like progress. Later that night, celebrating with my team, I realized we'd built something bigger than a business. We'd created a community, a place where authenticity mattered more than profit margins. The hardest story never made it onto a label. It was the memory I kept private, too painful to share publicly. The night Dad made me throw away leftover casserole because he called it peasant food. I was 12, proud of helping Grandma Lou make dinner for a neighbor who was sick. Dad came home, saw the simple dish on our counter, and flew into a rage about maintaining appearances. The casserole went straight into the garbage. "We don't eat poor people food," he'd said. "And we certainly don't serve it to others." I'd cried for hours, feeling like I'd betrayed Grandma Lou and embarrassed my family. That night taught me to hide the parts of myself that didn't meet their standards. But now, writing that memory on a piece of paper in my apartment, I felt different. I wasn't that ashamed 12-year-old anymore. I was a successful business owner who'd honored Grandma Lou's legacy despite family opposition. I folded the paper carefully and taped it to my refrigerator. Some stories didn't need public revenge, just private healing. The next morning, I found a voicemail from Mom. "Charlotte, I'm proud of what you've built. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." 2 years later, I stood in the frozen food aisle of a Whole Foods in downtown Chicago, watching customers discover Lou's Kitchen products. A young mother read the funeral potatoes label to her daughter, explaining how food connects families across generations. An elderly man grabbed 3 trays of poor man's lasagna, smiling as he read Grandma Lou's final message. A college student photographed the labels for her social media, adding hashtags about authentic comfort food. Sarah appeared beside me, still wearing her kitchen apron under a winter coat. Hard to believe, isn't it? Behind us, Deshaun corralled his son while Tommy organized inventory sheets. Our unlikely family, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. "She would have loved this," I said, thinking of Grandma Lou. "She does love it," Sarah corrected gently. "Every customer who connects with these stories, every person who feels understood, that's her legacy continuing." I pulled out my phone and took a picture of our products on the shelf, surrounded by corporate brands worth billions. But our little corner glowed with authenticity, with stories that mattered. The caption wrote itself, dedicated to Grandma Lou, who never laughed when I said I'd make something out of this. My parents called that night, wanting to visit the new production facility. Not to invest or partner, just to see what their daughter had built. For the first time in years, I said yes. Some dreams are worth fighting for, even when your family stops believing in them. Especially then.